the United States has been looking a lot more like an empire nowadays. Illegally kidnapping and killing foreign leaders has become par for the course in Trump's desperate strongman regime. But this empire problem has been around for a lot longer than Trump. In fact, the US has always been an empire, just a hidden one. This year at the Super Bowl, Bad Bunny gave hundreds of millions of Americans a glimpse into life in one of the United States' colonies, Puerto Rico. And it was the most politically radical Super Bowl performance of all time. I'm looking at you, Kendrick. And everyone loved it, except for a few losers.
I just want to catch my fish, drive my truck, drink my beer.
The performance involved symbolism of Puerto Rico's colonization by the United States in the form of prop sugar plantations and electrical power outages. Many people, especially in MAGA world, are also confused because Bad Bunny is American, even though he's a Spanish-speaking Latino man. And I don't mean that just in the sense of the outro of his performance, that everyone in America is American, but I mean that he is literally a US citizen. That's because Puerto Rico is a territory of the US, which is a nice way of saying that Puerto Rico is a modern-day colony. It may be obvious to some, but a lot of people don't know Puerto Rico is a part of the United States. That's because in US education, we're not taught to think of the US as an empire like the British or French with their oppressive colonies. We're taught to associate the United States with freedom and autonomy. The US is a benevolent liberal democracy and would never impede on the sovereignty of another country, because independence is the US's founding ideal. The reality is different, of course. The US does have colonies, and Bad Bunny's native Puerto Rico is certainly one. Less talked about, though, is the colony of Hawaii, which got promoted to a state after paying with blood in the Pacific theater of World War II. These two US colonies, Hawaii and Puerto Rico, have a lot of similarities, which Bad Bunny has pointed out. In Puerto Rico's case, that unrequited feeling of being American, while not really being American in the eyes of many mainlanders, is a palpable part of Puerto Rican existence. Since becoming a U.S. colony in 1898, Puerto Rico has still not been granted statehood for over 130 years. Puerto Rico's official title is Commonwealth of the United States, which is a measly designation compared to the long and painful history of reaching said title. Initially, I didn't even think to make a video essay on this topic, but the book that I happened to be reading, How to Hide an Empire by Daniel Immerwahr, was just like the perfect work to look at this performance. I swear I read books that aren't just for content, guys. I'm not performative, okay? I'm not a performative male. Anyways, this book showed me just how fucked up the history of Puerto Rico really was. US-backed massacres, attempted coups, totalitarianism, starvation, poverty, and so much disease defined Puerto Rican existence through the 20th century. Therefore, it's no wonder that Bad Bunny's explosion onto the United States' biggest stage, the Super Bowl, came with such political activism. In fact, I think that's the reason why Bad Bunny's lyrics resonate where many other political messages might fail. It is only natural that a Puerto Rican would advocate for his his territory in such a way. It's not vapid multiculturalism or woke, as many people would say, but it's a genuine advocacy for a place that's been forgotten. If you remember last year, Kendrick Lamar's Super Bowl performance encountered a lot of interesting discourse on how political a Super Bowl performance can really be. At least on my timeline, all the other lefty political content creators and video essayists said that Kendrick's performance literally couldn't go far enough politically.
Kendrick's performances are close enough to the edge, to the line without crossing them most of the time. I knew we weren't getting something super heavy when he cut Hate Popo out at the last Super Bowl performance, when he cut Hate Popo out of the Amazon performance. This is a paid check. It is what it is.
The Super Bowl is the most watched TV event in the United States, so background dancers waving Palestinian flags is a no-go. Even directly criticizing Trump couldn't happen because the motherfucker was literally right there. On the other hand, Bad Bunny's a pop reggaeton artist, which, you know, he has a reputation for Puerto Rican pride, for sure, but he wasn't traditionally thought of as a political artist, unlike Kendrick Lamar. In spite of that, Benito was the one who gave the more striking political performance, in my opinion. FYI, this is not oppression Olympics here, everyone. Like, it's not about which oppressed minority can make better political art in the 2020s, right? That's stupid. But it's more like being the right guy at the right time.
The revolution about to be televised. You picked the right time, but the wrong guy.
I've been a Kendrick fan since I was like a kid, but like he said himself, no artist can save you, which I think is absolutely true. Neither Kendrick Lamar nor Bad Bunny are going to be the people who fix this political system. That has to come from the people in whatever capacity we have. Anyways, this video is really about why Bad Bunny's performance was so politically effective. I think it's because existence as a Puerto Rican is that of the colonized, even if you're the biggest artist in the world, like Bad Bunny. Puerto Rico is one of the United States' long-time moral failures, and Bad Bunny points out this imperial stain that exists to this day. Interestingly, that long-standing hypocrisy of the United States has never been more apparent till now, at least in my lifetime. To illuminate this hypocrisy further, we need to turn our attention to two of the most important men in modern Puerto Rican history, Pedro Albizu Campos and Luis Muñoz Marin. Hi, sorry to interrupt, but if you're enjoying the video, please do hit subscribe. I'm super close to 1,000 subscribers, and when I get that, I get monetized, so that would be freaking awesome. All thanks to you guys, but please do subscribe. Thank you again. Anyways, back to the video. Pedro Albizu Campos was one of the few Puerto Ricans lucky enough to go to a mainland college. In the early 1900s, hope was high for Puerto Ricans who expected that the U.S. would be better occupants than the former Spanish colonists who controlled the island for almost 400 years. Campos was almost certainly an enthusiastic supporter of the United States at the time, so his Harvard education felt like a great privilege to him. Then, Campos made the ultimate commitment to the United States when he volunteered for the Army during World War I, where he was relegated to the Black Battalion. The Army was segregated at that time into racially homogeneous battalions, and Albizu Campos' Puerto Rican and mixed ethnicity placed him into the majority black one. Many argue that Campos' experience of racism in the U.S. Army drastically changed his views of the U.S. for the worse. After Campos finished his service and his Harvard law degree, he returned to Puerto Rico and became president of the Partido Nacionalista de Puerto Rico, the Nationalist Party of Puerto Rico. Albizu Campos' resentment for the United States reached a boiling point when his nationalists uncovered an extremely racist document from a mainlander pathologist who was hired by the Rockefeller Institute to help with Puerto Rico's huge sick population. Dr. Cornelius Rhodes despised Puerto Ricans and experimented on them like animals, oftentimes letting people's conditions worsen to observe the results. Albizu Campos exposed a letter written by Rhodes that said that Puerto Ricans were better off dead, and that he furthered the process of extermination by killing off 8 and transplanting cancer into several more. This became headline news in Puerto Rico, and the outraged population vaulted Luis Albizu Campos and his nationalist movement into prominence. After the nationalists lost the polls, they took matters into their own hands, using sugar plantation strikes and more militant strategies to achieve the goal of Puerto Rican independence. These clashes with police culminated in Albizu Campos' arrest and later the Ponce Massacre of 1937. In the city of Ponce, in Puerto Rico, police killed 17 civilians while injuring about 200 more in a peaceful protest. Many were shot in the back. The U.S. wanted to control the Puerto Rican independence movement, which was really a way of controlling Puerto Rico's largest export at that time, sugar. Bad Bunny's performance opened on the sugar fields worked by the Jibaros, or the native subsistence farmers of Puerto Rico. Jibaros donned their signature straw hats as they performed slave labor, essentially, for U.S. firms that established themselves in PR. In the first half of the 20th century, the United States transformed Puerto Rico into a monocrop economy, making them completely dependent on U.S. demand for sugar. The Puerto Rican economy was at the mercy of US tariffs because they had no opportunity to diversify into any other markets. Therefore, those jibaros were the ones that Albizu Campos recruited for island-wide strikes. Albizu Campos' militant approach also didn't gain much traction in Puerto Rico because of the other most important man, Luis Muñoz Marin. Marin started the opposition party to the nationalists, the Partido Popular Democrático, or the Popular Democratic Party, which ran on a policy of bread, land, and liberty. More emphasis was placed on the bread than the liberty, though, because Marin did not want independence from the US. Marin's party used liberal harm reduction strategies like prioritizing solutions to rampant starvation and disease in Puerto Rico by cooperating with the United States economically. This ideological opposition to the nationalists was a practical one, according to Marin. Through normalizing relations, Marin tried his best to integrate with the United States, which earned PR its nebulous Commonwealth status that persists to this day. A part of Marin's plan was to completely repress any nationalist sentiment on the island, specifically by getting rid of Albizu Campos. Marin strictly outlawed any nationalist organizing and discussion with his Ley de la Mordaza, or the gag law. Marin even banned the old light blue flag of Puerto Rico, which was identical to the new official flag except the darker blue that mirrored the US's stars and stripes. The flag that Bad Bunny waved in his Super Bowl performance was that old light blue one. This conversation is still happening today. Marin's totalitarian violence peaked in 1950 when the nationalists rose up in the city of Jayuya, where Campos-aligned nationalists took control of villages. Marin requested the help of the US government, and they responded in kind. They bombed these villages and Jayuya to wrest control of them from the nationalists. This was labeled an insurrection by the FBI and quickly forgotten. But keep in mind, this was a commonwealth of the United States that they were bombing. Puerto Rico was on the same level of sovereignty in the US as Hawaii at the time. Like, imagine if the United States bombed fucking Utah. Like, that's out of the question, right? But bombing the territory of Puerto Rico is fair game. Anyways, the nationalists were forced underground after Albizu Campos was jailed, but that didn't stop them from taking their covert activities to the mainland. In a case that we were never taught in our history books, 2 Puerto Rican assassins nearly killed President Harry Truman in New York. The 2 nationalists approached the Blair House in New York City, where Truman and the Secret Service were staying, from opposite ends of the building. One drew the attention of 8 Secret Service members on duty. Presidential security was much more lax in those days. Guarding the back of the building got into a gunfight with the other nationalist assassin, named Torresola. Torresola shot Officer Kofelt in the head, but while bleeding out, Kofelt managed to shoot Torresola and kill him. Later, Kofelt succumbed to his injuries in the hospital. If not for that gravely wounded police officer killing Torresola, there was a very good chance he would have entered the building and killed President Harry Truman. Truman was in his underwear taking a nap at the time when this gunfight was happening. Needless to say, the history of the United States is intertwined with Puerto Rico. In spite of that, the US is critically ignorant to the plight of any Puerto Rican. Bad Bunny is illuminating something that the US never wanted us to see. Benito critiques the modern-day problems of Puerto Rico. Electrical grid power outages post-Hurricane Maria in 2017, and abuelitas being priced out of homes they've had for generations. These modern-day policy decisions come from Marin's legacy of subservience to the U.S., particularly in the form of tax breaks for ultra-wealthy mainlanders who drive up the property prices in Puerto Rico. MAGA grifters like Jake Paul have decried Bad Bunny's performance as too woke, despite owning Puerto Rican property himself. The United States really hasn't removed its boot from the neck of the Puerto Rican economy since the days of the jibaros working the sugar plantations. Benito points out this economic dynamic in Lo Que Lo Paso a Hawaii, sung passionately by Ricky Martin during the Super Bowl halftime performance. It's a song about how the actual people of Hawaii and Puerto Rico have been forgotten as wealthy mainlanders flock to their beautiful beaches. Excuse my Spanish. Quieren quitarme el río y también la playa, quieren al barrio mío y que abuelita se vaya, no suelte la bandera, no olvide el lelolai, que no quiere que hagan contigo lo que le pasó a Hawaii. Really, the sentiment of the song is solidarity between Puerto Rico and Hawaii. Daniel Immerwahr makes the same comparison in How to Hide an Empire. In fact, the U.S.'s colonial policy in both territories share many similarities, from labor exploitation and totalitarianism to a gentrified tourist destination. Hawaii lost her sovereignty, like Puerto Rico, when a coup was staged by the U.S. to take the territory from Queen Liliuokalani, who was forced to abdicate her throne after being imprisoned. Hawaii was also a sugar monocrop economy, controlled by the U.S. in the early 20th century. Immigrant Chinese and Japanese coolie laborers worked as indentured servants in the U.S.-owned Hawaiian sugar fields, almost the same as the Jibaros in Puerto Rico. Then, when World War II broke out after the bombing of Pearl Harbor, Hawaii came under martial law and was changed into the primary staging ground against the Japanese. Hawaii was essentially transformed into a war camp where its large Japanese population, about a third of the island's inhabitants, were persecuted and discriminated against. Mirroring the mainland's policy of Japanese internment, the U.S. Army in Hawaii was a brutal regime for the island's diverse inhabitants. There was a curfew of about 6 to 8 p.m., and inhabitants needed travel permits, present your papers for wherever they went. If you were found to have any Japanese ancestry, you would be harassed by the island's police, oftentimes beaten or arrested for minor transgressions. Many Japanese Hawaiians were simply arrested and thrown into labor camps. Others were segregated into battalions for the war effort. Yo, what is up, everyone? This is Luke from the editing bay. I had a whole section recorded to put in here, but I didn't really like it that much, so I cut it out. But basically the gist of it was a transition between talking about Hawaii to talking about Puerto Rico. They have had very similar colonial bullshit going on from the United States. But a main point is that Hawaii eventually actually earned statehood for how they performed in World War II and being an integral part of that, while Puerto Rico did not achieve it and still has that Commonwealth status that I was talking about earlier. So, yeah. The history of Puerto Rico is the history of being forgotten or blatantly ignored by the United States. Bad Bunny is critically aware of this in his lived reality as a Puerto Rican. He still lives there and spends a lot of his time there. For him, the Super Bowl was the ultimate opportunity to broadcast the problems of his victimized homeland, as much as he could for a Super Bowl, which was honestly a lot. Whether intentionally or not, this critique opened up the colonial history of the U.S. in Latin America, which is the context of the ICE incursions into immigrant enclaves. Not to be a poser or ultra woke or whatever, but at the ICE protests here in LA, I was rocking this sign. It says, "How can you deport someone to a country that you ruined in the first place?" Monocrop economies, tariffs, and election meddling weren't just the strategies that were used on Puerto Rico, but the majority of countries in Latin America. Civil wars, regime changes, and austerity economic policies that were developed in Puerto Rico and Hawaii have been key in U.S. control of the Americas up to today. So when an immigrant comes to the United States, we have to ask ourselves, why not be open to someone whose country's sovereignty was violated by us? Don't we owe it to them? Or have we forgotten that we are all Americans? All right, that's it for this video. It was fun making it. Love the book. Love Bad Bunny. Please do subscribe, like, comment. I would very much appreciate it. We are so close to 1,000 subscribers. And yeah, that's about it. Bye-bye!